Jung's most dangerous discovery wasn't about mental illness. It was about people who see everything others miss, and why this ability slowly destroys them. In his clinical practice, Jung documented patients with what he called differentiated perception. These were individuals who could read micro-expressions. They could sense hidden emotions. They could detect psychological patterns that slipped past everyone else. They saw through social masks. They spotted lies instantly. They felt the unconscious tension vibrating in every room. Jung called this discovery dangerous because these people almost always ended up isolated, exhausted, and unable to maintain normal relationships. Not because they were unstable, but because seeing everything came with a psychological cost no one else could understand. He realized that when perception grows too sharp, too ruthless, too differentiated, it stops being a gift. It becomes a curse. And that sits when Jung uncovered the truth. This rare ability doesn't just shape you. It either destroys you or transforms you into something extraordinary. Understanding your specific pattern is crucial because each type requires a different approach to what Jung called the integration challenge. But first, you need to understand why Jung considered this discovery so dangerous. He observed the devastating effects of undifferentiated perception on his patients, and he concluded this: seeing everything without proper integration is not a gift. It is a genuine threat to both the individual and the collective. Jung identified 3 dangers that made this ability so terrifying. Danger 1: collective, unconscious disruption. Jung wrote, "The individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends." When someone sees through the illusions that hold groups together, the quiet agreements to ignore certain truths, they become a destabilizing force. Families, organizations, even entire societies survive on these unspoken pacts. The highly perceptive individual breaks them simply by existing. Danger 2: psychological isolation. Jung described this as the problem of the superior function, when your greatest strength becomes the very thing that isolates you. He wrote, "The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness." This isolation isn't just social. It's existential. You begin to feel as if you're living in a different reality than everyone else. And in a way, you are. Danger 3: identity dissolution. The most chilling danger of all. Jung found that people who absorb unconscious contents from others often lose themselves completely. Their boundaries dissolve. Their own personality fades. They become flooded with external material until they can no longer tell what is theirs and what belongs to others. Jung called this participation mystique, a state where the self disappears, consumed by the collective unconscious. He warned, the danger is not merely social exile but psychological annihilation, the complete loss of identity in favor of collective possession. This is why Jung believed integration was not just important, but urgent, because without it, superior perception doesn't make you extraordinary, it makes you prey. So he created a method, a process he called individuation, a way to protect the self while still engaging with the unconscious. Phase 1: recognition and differentiation. The first task was learning to recognize what you were absorbing and what actually belonged to you. He called this conscious discrimination. Without it, there is no individuality. Jung instructed his patients to spend time in daily solitude, silence, stillness, withdraw. Only then could the absorbed material settle, allowing the authentic inner voice to emerge. Phase 2, shadow integration. Jung discovered that those who see others' shadows most clearly often do so because they have not faced their own. The more you deny your own deception, selfishness, and cruelty, the more disturbed you will be when you see it in others. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if you have the courage to look inward." Shadow integration means accepting this haunting truth. You contain every quality you despise, every shadow you see. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a complete person, someone who can see clearly, without judgment. Phase 3, conscious participation. The final stage involves what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious. It means engaging with others' hidden contents, without being swallowed by them, without losing yourself. Jung wrote, "The individuated person can serve as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, helping to make the unconscious conscious in others without sacrificing their own integrity." But this required something dangerous, something rare, what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to hold another sit's unconscious material temporarily, while never forgetting it is not your own. Jung knew that superior perception could do one of two things: destroy you or transform you. To prove this, he studied history, and what he found was terrifying. The case of Nietzsche, an integrated perception. Jung was fascinated by Nietzsche's super's brilliance, but he also saw the shadow of it. Nietzsche's perception cut through society, religion, and philosophy with devastating clarity. But he never learned to integrate what he saw. Instead of using his insight to heal, he turned it into a weapon. He attacked, he shattered, and eventually, it consumed him. Jung wrote, "Nietzsche possessed extraordinary insight into human nature, but he remained identified with his superior function, rather than integrating it into a balanced personality." His isolation, his breakdown, they were not accidents. They were the natural consequence of unintegrated perception. The seer becomes devoured by what they see. The case of Meister Eckhart, successful integration. By contrast, Jung studied the medieval mystic, Meister Eckhart. Eckhart possessed what Jung called mystical intuition. He could perceive psychological and spiritual realities hidden from ordinary minds. But unlike Nietzsche, Eckhart channeled his insights. He turned them into compassion. He transformed them into teachings that nourished rather than destroyed. Jung wrote, "Eckhart transformed superior perception into wisdom that could nourish others without overwhelming them." He saw clearly, but spoke in ways that invited understanding rather than resistance. Eckhart's secret, conscious humility. He treated his perception as a gift to be shared, not a weapon to be wielded. Jung's own struggle, but perhaps the most haunting case was Jung himself. Between 1913 and 1919, his confrontation with the unconscious, he was nearly broken. He admitted, "I was menaced by a psychosis and was saved only by my ability to understand what was happening through my work with patients." His perception almost destroyed him until he realized it wasn't said pathology, it was evolution, consciousness itself, trying to push beyond the limits of the collective. This realization changed everything. He began to see his patients differently, not as broken, but as pioneers of the psyche, bearing gifts too heavy for ordinary society, the few who understand. Still, Jung knew isolation was deadly. He wrote that the most important task for the highly perceptive is to find the few who understand, those rare souls who can engage with differentiated consciousness without defensiveness. He identified 3 essential types of relationships. Type 1, fellow individuated persons, those who have completed the journey themselves. Jung wrote, the individuated person recognizes another immediately. There is a presence, an authenticity that cannot be fabricated. When 2 such people meet, the recognition is instant, rare, essential. They form what Jung called the conscious minority, and with them, you can be fully authentic. You don't overwhelm them, because they too have walked through the fire. Type 2, those engaged in individuation, people actively working on themselves through therapy, inner work, or spiritual practice. They may not possess the same perception, but they respect it. They can bear to be seen because they've already begun to see themselves. Jung wrote, those who have begun to know themselves can bear to be known by others. Type 3, natural containers. Some people, even without superior perception, possess a rare strength, what Jung called container function, the ability to hold the psychological contents of others without breaking. These are often the mature, the weathered, the ones who have suffered deeply, and in that suffering, forged a kind of inner vessel. The recognition process. How do you know when you said found such a person? Jung gave clues. They ask genuine questions instead of rushing to defend themselves. They admit contradictions without shame. They are interested in inner reality, not just outer appearances. They stay calm even when confronted with uncomfortable truths. These are the few, the ones who will not recoil from your vision, the ones who can walk beside you into the depths. They show genuine curiosity about consciousness and growth. But Jung warned curiosity alone isn't set enough. Revelation must be gradual. He taught a protocol. Step 1. Begin with small, gentle observations. Step 2. Watch their reaction. Step 3. Ask, do they become defensive or do they lean in with curiosity? Step 4. Only then, increase the depth. Step 5. Always offer insights as gifts, never as weapons. Jung emphasized, the goal is not to find people who accept everything you see. The goal is to find those who can engage with your perceptions as contributions rather than threats to their self-image. Because when perception is integrated, it serves both the individual and the collective, which is why Jung considered individuation not optional, but essential, not just for personal survival, but for the evolution of human consciousness itself. He wrote in The Undiscovered Self, the individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about the change in society. Jung called these people culture carriers, the ones who drag humanity, screaming, into its next stage of evolution. The 4 stages of transformation. Stage 1. Recognition without overwhelm. The moment you admit what you are without being crushed by it. Jung called this conscious acceptance of the superior function. He wrote, the beginning of wisdom is the recognition of what one actually is, not what one wishes to be or fears to be. Stage 2. Integration without isolation. Learning to use your perception while still maintaining real relationships. This is social individuation. The individuated person doesn't retreat from the world. They engage with it more consciously than ever before. Stage 3. Service without sacrifice. Your perception becomes a gift, not a burden, a bridge, not a prison. Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and then to offer that self in service of the whole. Stage 4. Legacy without attachment. The highest transformation. Your perception evolves into what Jung called the transcendent function. You contribute to the future of consciousness without caring whether anyone acknowledges you. Jung wrote, "The individuated person works for the future, not for recognition in the present." Integration becomes cultural medicine, but the path is dangerous. Jung warned of pitfalls, traps that derail even the most gifted. Pitfall 1. Inflation. The ego identifies with the archetype. You start believing you stir the prophet, the savior, the one who must wake up the world. Jung called this the prophet complex. It always ends the same way: preaching, judgment, and total isolation. He wrote, "The moment one believes oneself to be the bearer of absolute truth, one has fallen into the trap of unconscious possession." Pitfall 2. Withdrawal. The belief that others are too unconscious to bother with. Superiority disguised as wisdom. Jung warned true individuation requires engagement with the unconscious world, not escape from it. The hermit who withdraws has not transcended life, but been defeated by it. Pitfall 3. The helper sits trap. Some become addicted to being needed. Their entire identity collapses into helping, fixing, rescuing. Jung warned, when perception becomes identity, the person disappears behind the function. This isn't set individuation. It is self-erasure. Pitfall 4. The overwhelm return. Even the integrated can fall back. Stress, trauma, loss. They can reopen the floodgates. The individual drowns again in the unconscious contents of others. Jung's warning, integration is never permanent. It is a dynamic process requiring constant attention. Integration maintenance. To survive, Jung taught practices, daily solitude, to separate what's yours from what you've absorbed. Conscious choice, when and with whom you engage your perception. Ongoing shadow work to avoid projecting your own darkness. Relationships with those who can check your reality. And creative expression to bleed off the overwhelming input. Jung wrote, "The integrated person does not achieve perfection, but learns to dance consciously with their own psychological complexity." Because for Jung, superior perception was never about the individual alone. It was always about the collective. He called the highly perceptive consciousness pioneers, scouts of the psyche, the ones who feel the problems of humanity before they explode into reality. They suffer first because they sense what's coming. Jung wrote, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." The seer feels the fate approaching, and if they integrate, they help humanity face it before it detonates. The ultimate integration. At the highest stage, Jung said, the perceptive individual holds their ability lightly. They see deeply, but without compulsion to fix everything. They perceive fully, but without attachment to how others respond. He called this the transcendent function, serving the evolution of consciousness simply by embodying it. The patient who proved it. Remember Jung's patient from 1913, the introverted intuitive drowning in perception during Jung's own crisis. After 3 years of individuation work, her life changed completely. She learned to separate her own psyche from what she absorbed. She became a counselor where her perception healed instead of harmed. She built relationships with people who valued her gift. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing it as a curse and started experiencing it as what Jung always believed it was, a gift demanding conscious development. Jung wrote, "The patient learned not to see less, but to see more wisely, not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what she perceived." Her sight remained intact, but it no longer destroyed her. It transformed her. And that was Jung Sit's most dangerous discovery. That some are born with the perception the world isn't ready for, that it will either break them apart or turn them into the very pioneers humanity needs to survive. The danger is not in the seeing. The danger is in failing to learn how to carry what is seen. You are not broken because you see too much. You are ahead of your time. The question isn't whether you can suppress your perception to blend in. The question is whether you will learn to wield it with the wisdom, the discipline, and the integration that turn it from curse into cultural medicine. Because the world doesn't just need your eyes. It needs your consciousness.